Good morning, my friends from Landenberg, Pennsylvania. Welcome back to the Reluctant Chaplain Bible Study Podcast. Uh, the results are in. I did a poll to see which study that we should do next because I was really torn up. I really didn't know where to go with it. I was going to go easy, and well, not easy. I don't think any of the books are easy, but I was going to go with Jude because it was so short. But then I thought, no, we really should go Old Testament this time. We did two New Testament books in a row. We did Philippians, we did James, and I felt like we should hit the Old Testament. Um, I'm assuming, and you know what all happens when you assume, but a lot of you who don't read the Bible regularly probably have your own kind of ideas about the Old Testament, and that it's the dark and scary, wrathful God and all that. And quite honestly, there's a lot of stuff in the Old Testament that really is wow, just dark and scary. And actually, it's one of the reasons why I've come to appreciate it so much is because it's so just raw and honest and everything else, and just leads up. And there's this wonderful red line running right through the Old Testament that leads to the New Testament and the coming of Jesus. So there's so much in the Old Testament, and I think the more you get into it, the more you read it, the more you really appreciate it. It really is incredible, the line of thousands of years going up there, and it's amazing. Anyway, so I put some titles out there for you guys to choose, and Ruth is the winner. It narrowly beat Malachi. Poor Esther only got one vote. Personally, I was hoping for Esther because that's the one who knew the best, but it's not going to happen. But Ruth is awesome. There's so much going on in Ruth. So today is just an outline. We're not actually doing the study today. We're just going to set it up, and the study will begin next week with the first one. So everything that I got on this background is from either the ESV Reformation Study Bible, the setup to Ruth. I also pulled some information off Chapod or Chopid.org. It's a Jewish website because I was looking, as you know, well, maybe you don't know, the Old Testament is the Jewish scriptures. So I pulled some information on there about the Babylonian Talmud. And I'll get to that in a minute. So Ruth is part of the historical books of the Old Testament. They're broken up into different things, and I'm actually not prepared to do that right now. It's like the poetry books, major and minor prophets, historical narratives, and I know I'm missing stuff, wisdom literature, I think. But we'll get into that in another time. It's part of the historical books. Ruth author is unknown, but there's plenty of speculation, as there always is, as to the authorship. Some think that it could have been King Solomon after the death of his father, King David. Some think it was well, the Babylonian Talmud, which is a central text to rabbinic Judaism. Um, Thinks that it was, or says it was. I'm sorry, the I can't read my own notes. The Babylonian Talmud, which is a central text to rabbinic Judaism, which was compiled between the third and sixth centuries, and believed to be a more authoritative compilation than the earlier Jerusalem Talmud, believes it was the prophet Samuel. I sent a text off to Dr. Hicks, who also wanted to do Ruth. Him and his wife voted for it. And he also thinks that it makes the most sense that it was Samuel, the prophet Samuel. And there are other commentators who argue for this because they believe Judges and Ruth were originally one book, which is something I didn't know. That's really an interesting thing. I'll have to ask Lester about that one too. And there are others who argue that it was compiled during the 5th century BC. It appears the earliest this book could have been written was during David's time because the genealogy at the end of this book ends with David. So his is the last name listed. David's rise to the throne was around 1010 BC, and he ruled over Judah and then all of Israel until about 970 BC. So the author wrote it either during his reign or later, and it's possible that he used written or oral records related to David to help with the story. So what's happening here in history? Um, Verse 1 of the opening chapter states, in the days when the judges ruled. So the period of the judges is the backdrop here. The last verse of Judges says, in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And that's Judges 21:25. So political anarchy, no central authority in Israel. It also indicates a lack of spiritual focus where God's word is no longer the standard. So, not a great time in Israel. Um, this story takes place during a severe famine in the land. And in the Old Testament, it's often understood that uh, something like this was a sign of God's displeasure with an unfaithful Israel. So, there was this was also a time of moral collapse, great apostasy, and physical hardship. So Ruth is like I said before, it's a historical narrative in the form of a short story. The purpose of the short stories in scriptures is to teach and encourage the people of God, but in a captivating, and I hate to say entertaining way, but yeah, an entertaining way. Um, it looks like the oldest extant copies of Ruth go all the way back to the 10th century. Um, the Aleppo Codex. I hope I'm pronouncing these right. And also from 1008 is the Codex Leningradinus. Gradinusis? I don't know, can't pronounce it, but they go way back. So there's some really seriously old copies of these that still exist. Um, some themes to watch for in Ruth as we go through this: emptiness to fullness. So, how God fills people who find themselves empty. As you'll get into this, you'll realize that the main characters are Ruth, Naomi, and Joab. Uh, and there's a lot of tragedy there. Massive loss of family, being sent off to a new land. I'm not going to do a spoiler here. We'll get into the story as we get there. But it really is cool. Second is the cost of disobedience, the people of God, and the consequences of sin. Third, God's sovereignty. So God's providence shining forth in the midst of chaos, which is what's going on here. Faithful living, which is number four. The character of and faith of people of integrity. So again, referring to again Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz here. And redemption, the biblical concept at the heart of the story. And of course, there's going to be messianic overtones there. You had to know that, right? And more. The line of David and Jesus. So this book points toward the future, and you'll see that toward the end of the text, and the messianic line going up toward Jesus, and how that all works out. The genealogies can be some of the most mind-numbing stuff to go through in the Bible, but they are there for a reason. And again, the more you learn, the more fascinating it gets. You'll probably never get to a point where you genuinely enjoy reading out 57 unpronounceable names in a row, but they were put there for a reason. There's a direct correlation as it goes up through um, the line, and then you get into the New Testament and the genealogies there, and you can see how Jesus is in that line, and it's really cool stuff. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to getting into the book of Ruth with you guys. I will put out the next episode within the week. We got a lot going on here at the house. There's kind of chaotic times here, but but good times. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. Thank you guys who actually took the time to click a little button and choose the next book. And hopefully I'll do a good job with it. So pray for me for that. Anyway, love you guys, and I will see you on the next episode. I lost track of what number this is, but whatever number this is, I'll see you on the next number. Have a great day.